On a blazing summer afternoon, in a quiet suburb outside New York City, the air shimmered above the cracked asphalt. 10-year-old Eli Carter trudged home from school, his worn backpack slung across his shoulder, every step echoing the heat of a life lived on the edge of struggle and survival. But that day, fate waited for him on the side of the road. There was a cherry-red Mustang, Shelby GT 500, its hood raised like a beast gasping for air. Beside it stood a man in a designer suit, his polished shoes dusted with dirt, his voice sharp as he barked into his phone. That man was Nathan Reed, the billionaire CEO of Reed Corporation, one of the most powerful names in New York real estate. When Eli saw him, something in the boy's chest stirred, not fear, but purpose. He stepped forward, cautious yet confident, the weight of his small toolbox pressing against his back. "Need a hand, sir?" he asked, voice steady. Nathan turned, his annoyance flickering into disbelief. A poor black boy offering to fix a millionaire's luxury car? Impossible. Yet the boy's eyes, sharp, curious, determined, made him hesitate. As Eli leaned over the engine, his small fingers moving with instinctive precision, sunlight caught the glint of a ring on his hand, a gold band crowned with an emerald stone. The light danced across its surface, revealing a tiny crescent-shaped flaw within the gem. Nathan froze. He had seen that ring before. He had given it away 12 years ago, to a child who vanished when the orphanage called Bright Futures mysteriously closed overnight. His heart pounded. The world seemed to stop. Who was this boy? How did he have that ring? And what truth, buried in the ashes of his family's empire, was about to claw its way back to the surface? Because what Eli didn't know was that his small act of kindness, stopping to help a stranger, was about to unravel a billion-dollar secret and force a powerful man to face the ghosts of his past. If you've ever believed that one good deed can change everything, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now, because this story will hold you until the very end. Nathan crossed his arms, impatience carved into every line of his face, as Eli crouched beside the gleaming Mustang. The boy's small hands hovered over the engine with a confidence far beyond his years. Steam hissed from beneath the hood, carrying with it the sharp, sweet scent of leaking coolant. Eli inhaled softly once, twice his brow furrowed in quiet calculation. "You smell that?" he asked without looking up. "That syrupy kind of smell? It means your cooling system's leaking," Nathan scoffed. "Kid, this car costs more than your entire neighborhood. You really think you can fix it?" Eli didn't answer. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm and leaned in closer, eyes scanning every bolt, every hose, every whisper of heat rising from the engine. His voice, calm but assured, broke through the tension. "See that puddle under the radiator? That's coolant. It's dripping right where your upper hose cracked. If you drive it now, the engine's gonna fry." For the first time, Nathan was silent. The arrogance in his eyes faltered, replaced by something else: curiosity, disbelief. He had paid entire engineering teams to diagnose problems slower than this boy had done in under a minute. Eli reached into his backpack, pulling out a small tin box. The faded letters on its lid read, "Marcus Auto Repairs." From it, he took out a strip of reinforced tape and a small wrench. "My uncle says everyone should know how to fix what's broken," Eli said, his tone simple, almost apologetic. He tightened the clamp, sealed the crack, then stepped back, brushing dust off his knees. "That should hold until you reach town. You'll need to refill your coolant, though." Nathan stared at the boy, the grease on his fingers, the oversized shirt with peeling letters, the shoelaces tied unevenly. This child, standing barefoot on blistering pavement, had just done what 2 roadside mechanics couldn't. But then, as Eli reached up to wipe his forehead again, sunlight struck something on his hand. Nathan's breath caught, a glimmer of green, deep, rich, familiar. The emerald stone on a ring too large for the boy's slender finger, held in place by a twist of thread. It shimmered with a pattern he could never forget, a tiny crescent-shaped flaw buried in the heart of the gem. His mind spun backward 12 years, a cold orphanage hallway, a small child clutching his hand, the promise of return. "One day, I'll come back for you," he'd said. And then, the doors closed. Bright Futures was gone. Every record, every name erased overnight. Nathan's throat tightened. The voice of that child echoed faintly through his memory, soft, trusting, lost. The narrator's voice sank low, solemn. "Some promises never die. They just wait for the right moment to return." Nathan looked at Eli again, the way the boy stood, the quiet confidence in his eyes, the strange familiarity he couldn't place. Something inside him shifted. a weight he hadn't known he carried pressing against his chest. He took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Hop in," he said finally. "Let me give you a ride home." As they drove down the empty country road, the golden light of evening poured through the windshield. Nathan glanced into the rearview mirror. Eli sat in silence, staring out the window, the ring catching the sun again and again. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met in the glass, the innocence of a child reflected against the weary gaze of a man who had forgotten what innocence looked like. In that reflection, Nathan didn't just see a boy. He saw a reckoning. Sleep refused to come that night. Nathan lay awake in the darkness, eyes open, mind racing. Every time he closed them, he saw that ring, its emerald stone gleaming under the sun, the crescent flaw burning into his memory like a scar that refused to fade. He had tried to forget Bright Futures Orphanage years ago. He had buried it, locked it away under layers of business deals, wealth, and polished lies. But the past has a cruel way of digging itself out, especially when it carries your own broken promise. At 2:37 a.m., Nathan gave up on pretending to rest. He slipped out of bed, poured a glass of bourbon, and stood by the window overlooking the glittering skyline. Every light in the city below felt like an accusation. With a sharp inhale, he grabbed his phone. "Raymond," he said when the line picked up, his voice low and controlled. "I need you to find someone. Name's Eli Carter, about 10 years old, lives somewhere outside the city. And check something for me, Bright Futures Orphanage. It was shut down over a decade ago. I want to know why." On the other end, the investigator's tone sharpened. "Bright Futures? That place was sealed tighter than a vault. You sure you want me digging into that?" Nathan hesitated only a moment. "Just do it. And Raymond, whatever you find, you come to me first." The hours dragged. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the faint buzz of city traffic, all of it gnawed at him as he stared at the emerald ring sitting on his desk. It looked almost alive, pulsing faintly in the dim light. He remembered giving it to a child, a little girl, but that was impossible, wasn't it? The orphanage records were destroyed, the children scattered, the program terminated. Still, something deep in his gut told him this was no coincidence. The next morning, the call came. Raymond's voice crackled through the line, urgent. "Nathan, I found something." The orphanage's property was bought out 12 years ago by a holding company, shell accounts, offshore transfers, but all roads lead back to Reed Corporation. Nathan froze. "My company? Your father's company, technically, and it gets stranger. I pulled partial archives, whatever's left. Most of the adoption records were wiped, but there's one note, red ink, across the top." Raymond's tone lowered. "Project Genesis, special case, contact RR. RR, Richard Reed, his father." The name hit like a punch to the chest. Nathan sank into his chair, the breath leaving his lungs in a single sharp exhale. His father had sworn that Bright Futures closed due to funding issues, that everything was handled legally. But if Reed Corporation had owned it, and if those children had been part of something, a project, then nothing was what it seemed. He turned his chair toward the window again. The city sprawled before him, magnificent and hollow. His reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, the image of a man who had everything except peace. Beneath his hand, the emerald ring seemed to burn hotter. For the first time in years, Nathan felt fear, not of losing power or wealth, but of uncovering what his family had built upon. He closed his fingers around the ring, the metal cold and heavy. "What did you do, Dad?" he whispered. Silence answered him, thick and suffocating. The narrator's voice deepened, carrying the weight of the moment. "Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It traps you between who you were and who you have to become." Nathan straightened, jaw tightening. The time for denial was over. Whatever lay buried in his family's past, stolen lives, broken promises, hidden experiments, he would find it, even if it meant tearing down the empire that bore his name. The faint hum of an old radio filled the workshop, the melody warped and crackling, but somehow comforting. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, his hands buried in wires and screws, his face smudged with oil and curiosity. A warm shaft of sunlight cut through the dusty window, glinting off the metal tools scattered around him. "You're not giving up on that old thing, huh?" Uncle Marcus chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag as he leaned against the doorway. Eli grinned without looking up. "You said everything broken can be fixed if you listen close enough." He twisted a knob, sparks flashed, and static dissolved into a faint jazz tune that filled the air. His eyes lit up. "See? Just needed a little patience." Marcus's deep laugh echoed through the shop, proud and full of love. "Your mama would have said the same thing," he murmured. "Guess you got her stubborn streak." From the kitchen, Aunt Linda called, her voice soft but firm. "Eli, honey, come wash up. Dinner's almost ready." The scent of cornbread drifted in, mingling with the smell of grease and engine oil. It was an ordinary evening, the kind of peace only families built on quiet resilience could know. But tonight, that peace was fragile. Eli stood, brushing dust off his jeans. "Uncle Marcus," he said casually, "I met this man today. His car broke down. I fixed it." Marcus raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. "Oh yeah? You just fixed a stranger's car, huh? What kind?" "A Shelby Mustang GT 500, Eli said proudly. Marcus let out a whistle. "That's no small job, kid. Who was he?" "Some businessman," Eli shrugged. "Nathan Reed. He said he worked in the city." The sound of a dish clattering came from the kitchen. Linda froze mid-step, her eyes flicking toward Marcus. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then Eli added, "He saw this ring. He looked scared, like he'd seen a ghost." He lifted his hand, the emerald stone catching the fading light. Marcus's smile faded. Linda's face went pale. They stared at the boy at that ring like it had suddenly turned into something dangerous. "What's wrong?" Eli asked, his voice small, unsure. Marcus set down the rag, his eyes darker than Eli had ever seen them. "That name," he said slowly. "Reed. Are you sure?" Eli nodded. "He even gave me his card." Marcus took the card, reading it in silence. His hand trembled. Linda stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Marcus," she whispered. He nodded grimly. "I know." He turned to Eli, his voice quieter now. "There are things we never told you, about your mama, about where you came from." Eli blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked between them, confused. The gentle warmth in the room had shifted, replaced by something heavy, like the air before a storm. Linda took a deep breath, her eyes soft but glistening. "Your mama, Clara, she wasn't just any nurse. She worked at a place called Bright Futures." Eli frowned. "The orphanage?" "Yes," Marcus said. "But it wasn't what it seemed. One night, everything changed. She ran, took you with her." His voice broke slightly. "She said they'd never stop looking, that you were special." Eli's heart thudded in his chest. "Special? How?" Neither answered. Linda walked to an old cabinet in the corner and opened a small tin box. Inside was a yellowed envelope, sealed and worn from years of waiting. On its front, written in neat, fading ink, "For Eli. Open only if someone from the Reed family finds you." Marcus's voice cracked as he spoke. "She made us promise. We were never to tell you unless this day came." He placed the envelope in Eli's trembling hands. The paper felt fragile, almost alive. He stared at the name Reed, the same name printed on the business card now lying on the table. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the radio, still playing that old tune. Eli's voice was barely a whisper. "So, it's happening now?" Linda nodded, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, baby," she said. "It's happening now." The narrator's voice lowered, steady and solemn. "Every secret has a time to be told, and for the Carters, that time had come." The office was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. The city glittered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, but in here, everything felt cold, sterile, like the heart of a machine that had forgotten what warmth meant. Nathan stood by his father's desk, the faint light from the skyline cutting sharp lines across his face. The emerald ring sat heavy in his pocket, burning like a secret begging to be spoken. Richard Reed didn't look up when Nathan entered. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, scrolling through a set of documents, as if the world beyond his company walls didn't exist. Finally, his voice came smooth, measured, dangerous. "I hear you've been asking questions." Nathan swallowed hard. "About Bright Futures." Richard set the papers down, his eyes lifting slowly. "Ah," he said, almost amused. "So that's what this is about." He rose to his feet, buttoning his tailored suit jacket. "I told you, Nathan, some doors should never be reopened." "You owned it," Nathan said, his voice low but shaking. "Reed Corporation bought that orphanage. You shut it down. Why?" Richard's expression didn't change, because it served its purpose. Nathan's brow furrowed. Purpose? They were children, not lab rats. The older man's tone cooled, like steel sliding into place. "Some children," he said, "are born different, gifted. You can waste their potential, or you can refine it, channel it. Project Genesis was meant to harness what nature gave them to turn chance into power, a few sacrifices for progress. Nathan took a step back, his breath unsteady. Project Genesis? Richard leaned against the desk, studying his son with something between pride and disdain. You think empires are built on kindness? You think wealth like ours just happens? No. It's engineered by people willing to do what others won't. Nathan's voice cracked. You experimented on them. You took children with abilities and you used them. Richard's eyes hardened. We didn't use them. We perfected them. The words hit Nathan like a blow. Memories flickered his father's long business trips, the endless tests during his own childhood, the private tutors, the whispered phrases about potential. For the first time, it all made sense. My God, he breathed. You tested me, didn't you? I was one of them. Richard's silence was answer enough. The room seemed to tilt, the air thinning. Nathan pressed a hand to his temple, as if holding back the world from collapsing around him. You built this company on the backs of children, he said, voice trembling. And you made me part of it. Richard stepped closer. You're not part of it, Nathan. You are its future. The moment you stop questioning and start leading, you'll understand what greatness requires. Nathan's jaw tightened, fury boiling beneath the surface. If greatness means becoming you, I want no part of it, Richard sighed, almost pitying. That's your weakness. You feel too much. Empathy breaks men like us. Nathan stared at him, the father he'd once idolized, now a stranger cloaked in power and shadow. Empathy doesn't break men, he said quietly. It saves them. For the first time, Richard's gaze faltered. Just for a heartbeat. Then it hardened again. Be careful what you dig up, son. You might not like where it leads. Nathan turned toward the door, the weight of his decision already settling over him. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried fire. Maybe not. But I'm done pretending this empire is built on anything but rot. He paused, glancing back one last time. You taught me that broken things can be rebuilt, Father. You just forgot that sometimes you have to tear them down first. The narrator's voice lowered, steady as thunder before a storm. In that moment, Nathan Reed stopped being his father's heir and became his reckoning. Nathan stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind him with a hollow click. In the darkness of the office, Richard stood alone, surrounded by the quiet hum of the machines he'd created, and for the first time, the great titan of industry looked small. Nathan slipped the emerald ring onto his finger, its green glint catching the city lights. Whatever Project Genesis was, whatever secrets were buried beneath his family's name, he would uncover them, even if it meant burning Reed Corporation to the ground. The final bell rang across the schoolyard, its echo scattering flocks of birds into the evening sky. Children spilled from the doors in waves of laughter and chatter, but one pair of eyes wasn't smiling. From across the street, behind the tinted glass of a black SUV, two men watched in silence. Their suits were crisp, their faces expressionless. One lifted a camera, the lens locking onto a single target, a boy with an old backpack and a glinting emerald ring catching the last light of day. Eli Carter. The camera clicked. Once, twice. That's him, the driver muttered. The kid with the ring. The other man leaned forward, his gaze sharp. Mr. Reed Sr. wants him brought in. No mistakes. The SUV's engine hummed to life, creeping forward as Eli waved goodbye to his friends and started down the quiet street toward home. He didn't notice the vehicle trailing slowly behind, or the camera tracking his every step, but someone else did. Across the road, parked in an old pickup, Marcus Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He'd been keeping an eye on Eli ever since the boy mentioned Nathan Reed's name. And now, as the black SUV rolled in the rearview mirror, his heart dropped into his stomach. No, he whispered. Not again. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking, and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Ethan Brooks, came a voice on the other end, gravelly, cautious. The tone of a man who had spent too long chasing shadows. Who is this? This is Marcus Carter, he said quickly. You wrote those stories, didn't you? About the orphanages, about bright futures. A pause, then a low breath. Yeah, I've been trying to prove what happened there for 10 years. Why? Because I think they found one of the kids, Marcus said. My nephew, they're watching him. For a moment, all that came through the line was silence. Then, Ethan's voice hardened. Get him somewhere safe. Don't go home. I'm sending you a location. We'll meet in an hour." Marcus ended the call and started the truck. The SUV behind Eli sped up slightly. The boy turned the corner, humming quietly to himself, unaware of the danger. Marcus rolled down his window. "Eli!" he shouted. The boy turned, startled. "Uncle Marcus? What are you doing here?" "No time, kid. Get in." Eli hesitated, confusion flashing across his face. But something in his uncle's tone, sharp, urgent, made him obey. He climbed into the passenger seat just as the SUV accelerated. Marcus slammed his foot on the gas, tires screeching against the pavement. The chase began. The camera cut between cars, the black SUV weaving through traffic, Marcus's old truck jolting down narrow streets, Eli clutching the dashboard as his uncle's eyes darted between mirrors. "Uncle, what's happening?" the boy cried. "They're not here for me, are they?" Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind raced. Clara's warnings, the sealed letter, the name Reed, it all clicked now. Whoever those men were, they weren't here to ask questions. They were here to erase what shouldn't exist. Finally, he turned down an alley, braking hard behind a row of dumpsters. The truck's engine rattled to a stop. Marcus grabbed Eli's shoulder. "Listen to me," he said, voice trembling. "There's something big going on. Something your mom tried to protect you from. We can't face this alone, but there's a man who's been digging into it for years. He can help us." Before Eli could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Meet me at the old printing press. Come alone." Marcus nodded to himself. "We're almost there." Cut to the black SUV. The driver held up a tablet displaying a tracking feed. "Signal's back." They turned off Elm Street. His partner narrowed his eyes. "We've got him." Back at the warehouse, the lights flickered as Ethan Brooks paced the dusty floor, files spread across an old wooden table. Newspaper clippings, photos of the Bright Futures Orphanage, pages stamped classified. His voiceover echoed over the scene. "For years, I've followed the money shell companies, forged adoptions, missing records. Every trail leads back to the same name, Richard Reed." The sound of tires outside pulled him from thought. Marcus entered with Eli close behind. Ethan looked up, eyes widening at the boy. "It's true," he whispered. "He survived." Marcus nodded grimly. "And they know it." Ethan stepped closer, studying the ring on Eli's finger. The stone pulsed faintly under the light, reflecting a pattern that matched one of his old files. "That ring," he said, "it's not just jewelry. It's a key." He turned toward his laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. Lines of code and encrypted files scrolled across the screen. Then, with a soft chime, a document opened. The camera zoomed in on the header, stamped in bold, blood-red letters, "Project Prometheus, Confidential." The narrator's voice dropped to a whisper. And in that moment, they realized they weren't just fighting for the truth. They were standing at the edge of something far greater and far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The envelope was old, yellowed at the edges, soft as fabric, its corners frayed by time and touch. Eli's fingers trembled as he traced his name on the front. The ink had faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable, steady, graceful, familiar. Aunt Linda's voice broke the silence. "Your mama left it for you the night she disappeared. Said it was only to be opened if someone from the Reed family ever found you." Her words lingered in the air like a prayer too heavy to speak aloud. The room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, wind brushed against the window pane, carrying the faint hum of distant thunder. Marcus rested a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Whatever's in there, son, you're ready." Eli nodded, swallowing hard. He slipped a thumb beneath the brittle flap and lifted it open. Inside were several folded pages, worn but carefully preserved, and a small, hand-drawn map marked with red ink, a trail leading to somewhere deep in the city. Between them lay a single note, written in Clara's delicate script. "My dear Eli," it began, "if you are reading this, then the past has caught up with us. There are truths I could not tell you, not then, not while they were still watching. But know this, I did not run because I was afraid. I ran because you were meant to survive." Eli's voice quivered as he read. "You were born into something you never chose. A program built to take what was special in you and turn it into something they could own. They called it Project Prometheus. Your ring, it's the key to everything. Protect it with your life." His breath hitched. "When you're ready, twist the stone counterclockwise. Only once." He stared down at the ring, the same one that had drawn Nathan's eyes, the one that had followed him his entire life. Slowly, carefully, he turned the emerald. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a faint click. The gem lifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment no wider than his fingernail. Inside, a metallic glint caught the light, a microchip, small enough to go unnoticed, powerful enough to shatter an empire. Ethan leaned forward, awe in his voice. That's it. That's what they were hiding. He placed it gently into his laptop's port. The screen flickered, then came alive with encrypted files. One by one, they began to open videos, documents, voice recordings. Static crackled. A grainy clip appeared. Richard Reed, younger, sharper, his voice cold and certain. Begin selection process. Only the children with cognitive anomalies. The others are expendable. Another clip followed security footage from Bright Futures. Guards escorting terrified children down a corridor. Then, a voice from off-screen. She took one. The nurse. She ran with the boy. A gunshot echoed. Eli's face drained of color. That was her. That was my mom. Marcus lowered his head, whispering a prayer. Linda covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. The video cut again, this time an order signed and stamped by Richard Reed himself. Eliminate witnesses. Terminate Project Bright Futures. Transfer assets to Genesis Holdings. Eli's shoulders shook. She died because she tried to save me. His voice cracked, raw and small. All this time, she was protecting me. Nathan stepped forward from the shadows, eyes heavy with regret. She did more than that, he said quietly. She exposed them, and now we can finish what she started. He took the drive, his jaw set, determination blazing behind his grief. The world deserves to see this. Every lie, every name, every crime. The narrator's voice softened, almost reverent, as if the story itself bowed under the weight of truth. In that small room, beneath the hum of old lights and the ghosts of a mother's love, a boy held proof that could bring kings to their knees. The past had finally spoken, and it demanded justice. Eli closed the letter and pressed it to his chest. The wind outside rose, rattling the windows like an echo of Clara's voice, not in fear, but in defiance. He looked up at Nathan, eyes clear, burning. Let's end this, he said. Nathan nodded, sliding the drive into his pocket. We will. And in that moment, beneath the flickering glow of a single bulb, two lives, one born of privilege, one of pain, aligned on the same path. The light caught the emerald once more, scattering its reflection across the walls like fractured stars. Justice was coming. The boardroom on the 50th floor gleamed like a blade. Walls of glass swallowed the skyline, and the conference table, a slab of smoked glass the size of a limousine, reflected the white-hot fury of Richard Reed. Executives lined the walls, whispering, phones muted, eyes down. Richard slammed his palm against the table. Where is my son? His voice cracked through the silence like a whip. He called this emergency meeting, and he is late to his own reckoning. The double doors opened. Nathan stepped in, shoulders squared, a quiet fire in his eyes. Beside him walked a woman in a navy suit, every movement efficient, every gaze precise. Apologies for the delay, Nathan said, calm as the room turned toward him. This is Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Daniels. She has a few questions regarding corporate acquisitions and human trials conducted under an entity called Genesis Holdings. The air changed. The executive stiffened. Richard's expression sealed into something colder than steel. You've lost your mind, he said. This is a private meeting. Remove her. Sarah set a folder on the table. Not anymore. Nathan plugged a drive into the wall display. The room dimmed as the screen flickered to life. Files bloomed, contracts, transfers, shell entities, property deeds, a map, a timeline. Then the first video rolled. Richard, 15 years younger, faced the camera. Begin selection. Only the children with abnormal cognitive patterns. The others are non-essential. A murmur rippled along the glass. Richard barked, "This is inadmissible. Stolen property. You cannot." "We can," Sarah said, "and we will." Nathan's voice did not rise. It did not need to. These documents show Reed Corporation's direct control of Bright Futures Orphanage before its closure. Your signature appears on every authorization. The children were relabeled assets. Their records were erased. Their lives rerouted into Project Genesis. "We create futures," Richard hissed. "We do what weak men are too afraid to do. You want a world that runs? You feed it fuel. Hard choices, hard hands." Nathan met his father's glare. "You call this vision? I call it violence." The doors opened again. 3 figures stepped in. Marcus Carter, Ethan Brooks, And in the center, Eli, small but unshaken, the emerald ring bright beneath the boardroom lights. An audible shift moved through the room, that soft intake of breath that happens when the truth finally walks in. Richard stared at the boy, searching his face for something to diminish. He found nothing. "You do not belong here," Richard said. "Take that child out. He belongs more than any of us," Nathan replied. "He's the reason we're here." Eli moved to the display. The camera light traced the outline of his cheek, the calm in his eyes. He lifted his hand. The ring caught the city glow. "My mom said when the day comes, I should use the key," he said quietly. He twisted the emerald, a crisp click. The tiny compartment slid open. Nathan placed the microdrive into the console. New files unlocked. A second video began. Nighttime security footage. A hallway. A nurse in scrubs, Clara clutching a small child to her chest, running. The angle shifted to an office. Richard leaned in close to a guard, his voice low and lethal. "Find her. The boy is priority. If she resists, remove the obstacle." The room went dead silent. Even the air vents seemed to hold their breath. Richard straightened, mask cracking. "Context," he snapped. "You do not understand the burden of what we do. Progress demands sacrifice." "Then why did you hide it?" Nathan asked. He clicked to another file. Bank logs, payoffs, a list of terminated staff coded as accidents. The last line bore a name, Clara Carter. Status, deceased. Cause, brake failure. "You signed all of it," Nathan said, voice like a steady drum. "Every check, every cover, every order." Ethan stepped forward, his camera already mounted on a shoulder rig, the red tally light burning. "We are live," he said, his tone flat with purpose. "Multiple platforms, tens of thousands watching. Mr. Reed, do you deny that Reed Corporation funded Project Genesis through shell accounts while overseeing experimental protocols on minors?" Richard's head snapped toward the lens. "Turn that off. I suggest you do not interfere," Sarah said, raising a document stamped with the seal of the court. "Warrant executed, devices seized, records preserved." Richard laughed, a dry, breaking sound. "You think a jury will bury me? This city eats from my hand." Eli took a step closer, voice steady as a held note. "You had everything, and you still took from children who had nothing." He lifted the ring, its green throwing shards of light across the glass table. "My mother was smarter than you thought. She kept everything." The screen brightened. Audio logs unspooled meetings with contractors, physicians, a line that chilled the room. Enhanced cognition yields tactical value. Then a final video. Clara, again, facing the camera in a dim storage room, hair tucked behind her ears, breath fast but firm. "If this reaches you, Eli, know this. You are not a mistake. You are a miracle. Run until you can stand. Then stand and speak. The truth will find you." Marcus covered his eyes. Linda's voice, recorded on a separate clip, whispered a prayer. Nathan's hand closed around the edge of the table, as if steadying the earth itself. Richard moved, sudden and desperate, lunging toward the console. Two federal agents stepped from the doorway and pinned him back before his fingers reached the plug. "Richard Reed," Sarah said, her voice resonant in the charged quiet. "You are under arrest on probable cause for conspiracy, child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and destruction of evidence, pending formal charges." The table erupted, executives shouting, chairs scraping, but the camera stayed true, the lens unblinking. Outside the glass, the city burned gold in the falling Sunday. Inside, a dynasty cracked along its hidden seams. Nathan turned to his father, and in that look were all the years between who he had been and who he had become. "This ends now," he said. "With you." Richard struggled, the old swagger collapsing into something small and furious. "You will regret this," he spat. "You are throwing away a kingdom." Nathan shook his head. "A kingdom built on stolen childhoods is already ash." The agents led Richard toward the doors. He twisted once, eyes landing on Eli. The boy did not flinch. He simply reached up and slid the ring back into place. Ethan, still live, spoke into the world beyond the glass. "You are watching the fall of Reed Corporation in real time, as evidence of a clandestine program called Project Genesis is made public. The victims were children. The witness is a child who survived." The comments and view count surged off-screen, a chorus rising, a city listening. The narrator's voice dropped low, like a verdict. On the 50th floor, beneath the weight of sky and mirrors, the truth finally had a voice, and it was enough to bring an empire to its knees. The doors closed behind Richard Reed. The room stood still, stunned by the sudden quiet. Somewhere below, sirens began to climb the avenues. And high above it all, the emerald in a boy's ring caught the last light of day and held it, as if to say, justice does not ask permission. It arrives. The city had changed. The skyline that once mirrored greed and ambition now shimmered with something new, renewal. 5 years had passed since the fall of Reed Corporation, since the day truth shattered glass and power alike. The empire built on silence was gone. In its place rose something humbler, something alive. Nathan Reed no longer wore $1,000 suits. He'd sold them, along with the penthouse, the sports cars, the legacy. Every dollar went into a new foundation, the Prometheus Initiative. It didn't promise profit, it promised redemption. Its mission? To find gifted children from forgotten neighborhoods, kids like Eli, and give them the tools to shape the world rather than be shaped by it. For Nathan, it wasn't charity, it was confession. Each workshop he funded, each scholarship he signed, was a quiet apology, one brick at a time, rebuilding what his family had destroyed. We can't erase the past, he often said, but we can teach the next generation to write a better one. 5 years later, the sun rose over a place once marked by tragedy, the grounds where Bright Futures Orphanage had stood. Now, glass walls caught the light of morning, reflecting not secrecy, but possibility. Across the entrance in bold steel letters read, Carter Innovation Center. Inside, machines hummed, students laughed, sparks flew from soldering tables. And there, at the front of a bright hall lined with blueprints and memory, stood Eli Carter, no longer the wide-eyed boy on a dirt road, but a young man, confident, determined, and kind. At 15, he was already a mentor to those around him, his hands still stained with the same grease and brilliance that had changed everything years ago. On his finger, the emerald ring glowed softly, no longer a relic of secrets, but a beacon of truth. The auditorium filled with applause as Eli stepped to the podium. Journalists, teachers, and students turned toward him. At the back of the room, Nathan watched quietly, his heart swelling, not with pride, but with gratitude. Next to him, Ethan Brooks scribbled notes, the headline already forming in his mind. From orphan to visionary, the boy who rebuilt a system. Eli glanced down at his notes, then looked up, his voice steady and sure. My mom used to say, he began, machines can be fixed. But when a system breaks, when the world itself forgets its purpose, you don't just repair it, you rebuild it from the ground up. A hush fell. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching the emerald on his hand, scattering green light across the faces in the crowd. That's what we're doing here, Eli continued. Not chasing perfection, just building something honest, something better. Cut to a prison cell, stark, gray, empty. Richard Reed sat on his bunk, hands folded, eyes staring through the bars at nothing. The man who once commanded cities now had only silence for company. Outside, the world he tried to own was moving on without him. Back at the Carter Innovation Center, the camera panned across smiling faces, young inventors, dreamers, creators. In the lobby, a mural told the story, the orphanage, the fall of the Reed Empire, and the rise of something new. At the base of the mural, a plaque read, Truth is the foundation of progress. Nathan stepped beside Eli as the crowd rose in applause. For a moment, neither spoke. They didn't need to. In their shared silence was the weight of everything they had lost, and everything they had finally reclaimed. The camera pulled back, rising above the center, revealing its roof crowned with a glowing sign that flickered to life as dusk approached. Every child deserves freedom. The narrator's voice softened, rich with warmth and finality. From the ashes of greed rose the light of grace. A boy who fixed what was broken taught a man how to begin again. And together, they proved that redemption is not in the words we speak, but in the worlds we choose to build. If this story touched your heart, if you believe one act of courage can change everything, share this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Black Soul Stories. Because every time you do, you help light another path for a soul still searching for its way home. Every story begins with a choice, and sometimes the smallest one changes everything. On a scorching afternoon, a boy with a backpack full of tools stopped to help a stranger. That single act of kindness unraveled an empire built on lies and gave birth to something the world had forgotten: hope. Eli Carter never set out to be a hero. He didn't fight with power or wealth, only curiosity, courage, and the memory of a mother who believed in fixing what others deemed broken. His hands, once stained with engine grease, became the hands that mended a world torn apart by greed. Nathan Reed, the man who had everything, found the one thing his fortune couldn't buy: redemption. He chose truth over legacy, justice over comfort, and built something real from the ruins of his family's sins. And Richard Reed, who believed power made him untouchable, learned that no wall is high enough to contain the truth. Together, they reminded us of something simple yet eternal. True strength isn't measured in wealth or titles, but in the courage to do what's right, even when no one's watching. The emerald ring that once symbolized secrets became a beacon of truth. The orphanage that once hid pain became a sanctuary of creation. And the boy who once walked home alone now leads others toward a future where every child, no matter how small or forgotten, has a chance to shine. Because real power, the kind that endures, is born not from control, but from compassion, from understanding, from the quiet belief that if something is broken, it can be rebuilt. So, if this story moved you, if you believe that justice begins with simple acts of kindness, let your voice be heard. Share your thoughts below, and tell us what part of this story stayed with you. Don't forget to subscribe to Black Soul Stories, where we shine a light on the courage that changes lives and the hearts brave enough to rebuild the world. Every like, every comment, every share helps keep these stories alive. A reminder that no matter how dark the night, one spark of goodness can still light the way home.